Looks like we're having an all Florida show today, Suzanne.
How awesome is that? Welcome to the Sunshine State.
Hey, I call it the sweat state at this time of year.
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality.
Hey everybody, welcome to No Vacancy Live. I, of course, am Glenn Hausman, and as the unflappable Dr. Producer Suzanne. Hey, it's so great to see you today.
Awesome to see you. It's even more exciting to hear that you're like only 80 miles from me.
I know, and Anthony should be joining us. He's supposed to be here. I don't know. He must have gotten held up in a meeting. He's down in Jupiter, Florida, so it's pretty,
he's swimming to shore.
Yeah, I should let everybody know I'm at the Palm Beach Resort. I'm going to be attending the My Place Hotels of America conference. I'm hosting a panel tomorrow with some incredible folks like Neil Patel, the chairman of AHOA, Rachel Humphrey, Matt Campbell, COO of My Place, and Mark Skinner of the Highland Group. I'm really looking forward to being able to learn more about what they're seeing in their segment of the extended stay market, Suzanne. That should be good. Plus, we're going to be interviewing their executives right here live tomorrow.
That's jam-packed. Those are some really notable folks. That's going to be exciting for you.
I know, it is exciting. All right, so before we get going, I do want to thank the folks over at Choice Hotels for continuing to sponsor the No Vacancy podcast. Listen, reach out to them. They're going to be able to help you, particularly when it comes to the Radisson Legacy brands that are going to keep those brands, it looks like, in place. So now's a better time than ever to invest in Radisson Blue, Radisson Red, Country Inn and Suites, and the whole panoply of brands that they have there, as well as Comfort Suites, Comfort Inns, and all of the traditional Choice Hotel brands. So reach out to development teams at either company right now as they are being brought together. Match made in heaven, Suzanne. Now, listen, I arrived here last night at the Palm Beach Resort, and it's a great hotel. They put me to a room. I didn't love the room that I had because, you know me, I'm like a little, I'm a little like that. So I asked them if they could please switch my room, and they didn't have any available. And I'm like, pretty please, with sugar on top. And they're like, well, we have rooms available, but, we're short on housekeeping, so we don't have everything. We don't have all of the rooms done, but they were kind enough to send somebody up there and prepare a different room for me. Now I have a great room. I want to thank everyone for going above and beyond to do that. But I think that this really highlights the issues that a lot of our hotels are still having when it comes to labor challenges, right, Suzanne?
And actually, it was one of the things I was talking about in my class yesterday in housekeeping, and really addressing the fact that you might not have labor and what did the pandemic do. And so this is a perfect topic and timely homework assignment coming ahead.
I'm wondering if trying to find hoteliers to work in your hotel is more difficult and more painful than actual labor itself. And to find out, well, Adam's not going to know because he's a guy, but we'll find out anyway. Adam Glickman of Actabl. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Glenn. How are you guys doing? Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to talk about nothing other than labor with you and your crowd.
Yeah, this is great. So Adam's got a hard out at the bottom of the hour. So we're going to try to go through this really quick. And the point is we don't need to talk about this for an hour anyway. But Adam, before we start going through some of your big points, some of your individual points, what is the big picture out there? Because I'm feeling like it was really tough for hoteliers out there this summer because of the unprecedented amount of travel. And I'm really wondering about how the fall is going to go. What's the big picture in your world?
Yes, I think the big picture as we think about the future of labor is, at the end of the day, hotels are service businesses, and we need team members operating in our hotels. And we've got to find enough of them. And so to make sure that we have the right team members doing the right jobs, and use your perfect example of, did you have a room cleaned, and did we have to keep rooms offline? Where we're headed towards is, how do we strategically put the right platforms in place so we can optimize labor? The pandemic is not gone away. We still are going to have issues. Call outs will continue to stay very, very high. We're going to have big turnover issues, and smart hoteliers can think about how do they use technology to optimize the labor that they do have available.
Yeah, and that's great. And we're talking above and beyond.
We're strategically looking forward towards how do we manage 24.
Hey, Adam, I think your internet signal's a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs there. Susanna, you getting that?
Oh, he went cuckoo, that's for sure.
Now you're frozen. I'm gonna try. All right, there he is. All right, Adam, welcome back. You're really pixelating over there. Yeah. All right. So let's. Uh-oh. This is not going well. All right, Adam, see if you can get a better internet signal. We'll bring you right back in. All right. All right, sounds good. All right, so while he does that, Suzanne, you were talking a little bit about what, how you're seeing the issue and how you're thinking about it in terms as an educator. It really is changing the entire paradigm of how we have to think about labor in the hotel. And I'd like you to comment a little bit on what he was saying in regard to technology helping people out.
Well, certainly we have to look at how can we leverage technology in the use of the room to do an enhancement to what we're currently doing right now. And I know Anthony has talked about the use of robots. There's been some studies and some look at use for robots to assist in vacuuming. That's what we do at home. So how can we do it where we're still going to need a human in that space. Although I did start a research study a couple of years ago, this is pre-COVID, that looked at a self-cleaning hotel room. Could you imagine if you could actually put that together?
Yeah. All right, he's back. Adam, much better now. Although you do look heavily right over there.
Right, maybe stick my head between this light.
There you go.
There, okay, the perfect spot.
Yeah, man, the quality is actually so much better. Thanks, everybody, for dealing with us. So technology in hotels, helping labor. How do you see that particular issue? Is it technology such as Actabl's hotel effectiveness tool? Is it a function of utilizing things like Suzanne was just saying to remove some of the human labor out of it? Or maybe it's a combination of both?
Yeah, I think there is a set of tools that we have to think about, hoteliers have to think about putting in place that could change the way they operate their businesses as we look towards the future. And so it isn't just robots that are going to come in and take over roles that people had, but it's better thinking about how do I use the labor available to me. So a really good example of that, really grassroots, is thinking about if I have 8 hours of housekeepers available to me, where do I place them so we don't have an issue when we know we're going to have a full check-in night tomorrow? So let's make sure we have all those rooms clean. So we are going to need to move people like Glenn, who didn't like his room for whatever reason. Whereas 3 days
Honestly,
ago,
the reason was because it was in a place that when I was out on my balcony, it was looking right at the people at the bar, and it was just they're enjoying themselves, and I didn't want them to have to look at me all night and going, oh, look at that poor fool who does not have a good time. So I saved everyone from embarrassment.
And if you can make a plan to say, I know I'm going to need more rooms cleaned on, say, Friday night, and schedule around that, and maybe not schedule somebody as overtime on Wednesday, which would make sure you can optimize your costs when you do need that housekeeper. Thinking about that is something that you can't do anymore just on a spreadsheet, or it can't be just intuition, because there's so much variability now of how things are going to migrate and change as we look towards the future of different variabilities in demand. So you hit up the beginning of, we're going to see a lot more business travel come back. How do hotels optimize housekeeping scheduling, front desk scheduling? What kind of services are more typical business travelers going to want as you think about F&B? How does that get stacked into the mix?
And that's interesting. And it's going to be different for each different property type going forward, and specific brands in particular. I stayed at a Hampton Inn while I did a show from there in Lancaster. No secret about that. It was a great property. I really enjoyed staying there. But it's one of those things now you have to call as a policy for that particular brand to get that housekeeping. For me, as a business traveler, typically I don't want it anyway. So there is going to be a whole reassessing of how much work actually needs to be done by the housekeeping department, I think, in general, right, Adam?
Yeah, and it's we had one of the recovery areas that Hotel Effectiveness by Actabl has really looked at, is what we called the how many stayover cleans are cleaned. Is it guest request? Is it brand requirement? I think what we are seeing more and more of is guests have become very demanding. I think early pandemic, there was a lot of, and we've probably all seen it in our own lives, there's a lot of flexibility, and we're excited to get back out, and we are going to be very easy and friendly. The sign that says there's not enough labor that goes up on the front door is an excuse for only so long. And so where I'm going with that, as we think about stayover cleans, as we think about access to services, customers wanting things like full F&B options and not just, grab and go bags that I'm throwing some things in from a convenience store. How do we think about ensuring that those elements are incorporated back into the hotel service offer? All right. Sorry. From a stayover clean perspective, there is an increasing amount of stayover cleans happening across all spectrums. And I'll show you guys some slides in a few minutes. I think I may have a stayover clean slide. If I don't, we could always follow up on it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Suzanne, you got a question before we bring up these hotel labor trend slides?
Well, I think it's a great component as we really start thinking about the fact that we don't have the labor is just not going to work as an excuse. So we've got to leverage. I think one of the interesting pieces that I might look to think about as we start using more tools and technology, because we need to go more into the analytics, is what are the additional skills that these executive housekeepers might need to start implementing. We might need to start looking for or preparing those folks so that they can leverage and use these types of platforms to be successful.
And
Yeah.
I think, Suzanne, on the skills side, something that we've seen, and we looked and kind of look at executive team members at hotels, general managers, AGMs, executive housekeepers. The experience in the senior leadership in hotels is the greenest we've seen it since we've started tracking in our 15-year history. And a lot of that is because of the pandemic and because of the turnover. Seasoned hotel executives, whether they were a GM or an executive housekeeper, have moved on to other industries. And they're being replaced by team members who have lots of potential, but they just don't have that experience. And so how do they have the tools, the education, the training, the direction needed from above property leaders that would be different than somebody that was in a role that was very seasoned? That's something that I think as the industry, we really have to be looking at next year and into 2024 because we don't have the same bench strength that we had in the past.
What are you seeing in terms of fall travel? Because as we know, this is a big summer of everybody saying, F it, I'm going away with my family. That is absolutely coming to an end right now because we're getting back into fall routines like we used to back in the good old days of 2019, et cetera, et cetera. So do you think business travel and group business is going to be able to supplant that, requiring more labor in hotels as we've had to deal with all summer? Or will there be some sort of easing on the labor side because there might be lower occupancies?
I think that I'm not the forecaster to say like
I totally understand
business travel, but what I think we are seeing is that the ability to predict like we would have seen pre-pandemic, that has gone away. So I think anybody that is coming to say this is going to be the exact level of business travel demand, aside from groups on the books and the returns of small to medium-sized conventions, there are more transient leisure travelers that are continuing to stay in our hotels through the fall. And there is a return and a belief of a return of business travel. But my biggest takeaway, looking at our data, talking to operators that use our platforms kind of every day in and out, is we can't keep going back to like, this is the way we've always predicted it in the past. So we know the second week of September, the week after Labor Day, business travel skyrockets. It stays really busy till the week before Thanksgiving. That period has ended.
Yeah, so that's interesting because that means we don't have historical data anymore that'll really portend what you could expect in the future, which is makes it even more important to be focusing on some of these tools that you have here. So I think this is a good time to check this out. Oh, I got to go all the way back to the beginning. Oop, my fault.
That's okay.
All right, let's try it. Boom.
Yeah, there you go. Boom. Awesome. So what I'm going to talk a little about today, and I think this is a perfect segue into our whole philosophy in life, is as you think about how do we optimize profits and how do we minimize costs, maximize the revenue potential coming in the door, never turn away a guest because we don't have a clean room, which ultimately gets to maximum profits for management companies. We've got to look forward. We can't look at the past and say, historically, this is how it has worked. We've got to look towards the future. And so the next couple slides are really going to just give some highlights of where we are in the world of wages, where are we as we think about turnover. I'm going to talk about two cool indexes, cost per occupied room and hours of labor per occupied room. That kind of jazzes me up. And as operators, how do we think about these things? So,
and please make sure to use a lot of words for our audio only group as well.
I will do that. That is a great reminder. So let's start with something that for those that are physically watching, in front of you is the Hotel Labor Recovery Index. For those on the phone, the team at Hotel Effectiveness has tracked the amount of labor in hotels pre-pandemic, and then using the pandemic, the very start of it in April 2020 as a benchmark, how many jobs were lost in the US and what was our index down to, and how has that fluctuated and changed. So at the heat of the pandemic, right as it started and everything was shut down, for those not looking at the slides, we were at about 28% of the labor that we had as the
Right.
industry down to. That kind of bounced back up as we moved towards the first summer and then the second summer. Where we stand now as we kind of look at revenge travel 2.0, the summer that Glenn, you just talked about,
Yep.
we're back to about 82% of the labor that we had when the pandemic occurred are back. There's still plenty of opportunity for more jobs to get added back to get to full employment and have all the services that are needed to deliver on what guests would have expected pre-pandemic. We know that it's not going to be exactly the same, but we're at about 82% today through this summer.
So the meaning of full employment doesn't reflect the actual hard numbers. It's different today based on how many people are actually needed to run the property most effectively and efficiently. And when you're talking about bringing in some technology tools and maybe how guests may not want their rooms cleaned as often, there could be fewer people, but delivering the same results for the guests.
You nailed it. The way in which we deliver may change. The services guests require may change. But as you look at it as a true benchmark to say, where are we pre-pandemic or where are we now? We're at about 82% of where we were pre-pandemic today. The part that gets really tricky, which goes right into the next slide, is when we think about costs. Although we are down on labor, we are not down on costs. And there are lots of levers and variables that drive costs up.
I'm up on costs significantly, not just the labor, but every other element. But you all out there know this.
Yeah. And so how do we think about, it's not just optimizing the amount of labor. It's saying, how do we find the right balance of the labor needed and the costs to get to the right cost basis for an owner to maximize profits?
Right. All right. That's really, really interesting. All right. So although labor requirements are still far below pandemic levels, labor costs have suppressed 2019 in this second slide. Makes sense.
Yeah. So what this is showing for those that are not able to see the slide is basically we are spending more on hours of, we have fewer hours of labor going into hotels, but costs are higher than where they were pre-pandemic for both the kind of select service and full service segments. Still slightly below for extended stay, but why this is so critical, and of everything, and for those that can see the slide, why this is so important is we still don't have every single service that was in place pre-pandemic. There are still rooms that are not cleaned every night. There are still outlets that are closed. But costs are above that. And there are the levers that tie to that are wage rates, which I'll hit on in a second, are overtime. And so as operators, we've got to think about what are new strategies that are going to really optimize or make sure every penny we're spending is truly needed to deliver on a caliber of guest service. And that's what has to happen to try to right size this cost model as much as possible.
Wow. Suzanne?
It's pretty intense when you really think about it, and you've got to really pay attention. And that's why I actually just said yesterday to my students in class, you literally have to pay attention to what your costs are and managing your labor so much more critically than you've ever done before. And this literally puts into the literal picture what I just said, which is
and this still doesn't reflect the additional expenses that hoteliers are incurring just for goods and services for their property as well.
And this is truly the number one expense hoteliers have. We all know is labor, right? We are a people business, but there's plenty of other costs out there, and every element that goes into cost basis has to get applied towards kind of the profit model. So costs up, even though the amount of labor does not match or the hours of labor doesn't match, costs are up. And where the kind of really scary piece comes in, and the one thing I'd really encourage everybody listening, whether live or recorded, to think about, and if you're listening to this before you get into your 2023 budget season, the cost of labor is there. What isn't there is all the hours that we were used to pre-pandemic. Those hours are slowly creeping up. As those hours keep creeping up and the costs stay high, your budget is going to be out of whack. So we have to be really planning for what is 2023's budget going to look like to make sure budget's optimized. That would be my big red flag for everybody to pay attention to as you're doing your 2023.
That sounds awfully challenging, considering we just spoke about how you can't really predict accurately way ahead of time. It's probably a much smaller window when you have an idea of how many people you're going to need on any given day.
Yeah, and so this is why having some kind of platform, whether it's one of the tools that Actabl provides or other insight platforms that are able to help you look forward. We can't just look in the past, but we have to look forward 1 day, 3 days, 5 days to make sure we're planning next week the best way possible to optimize profits for next week.
Right. So what are we looking at here? What's this next slide all about?
Yeah, this just really, and this is, I decided to pull like examples for some full service hotels to give a sense of, as services are returning, particularly for the bigger hotels that have conferences and are struggling to find labor, how have we migrated to get to hours of labor per available per occupied room? And the key takeaway here is we don't have to go brand by brand is, and for those that are not able to see the slides, for the most part, we are approaching about 90% cross brands of the hours of labor per occupied room. This will keep creeping up, particularly as there is more business travel and more group and meetings travel.
Right.
And if you hit to the next slide, this kind of starts to get into where the costs come into play, which are the wages. And so there's a lot of numbers on here. For those that are not looking at the slides, the single biggest takeaway that I want everybody to think about is our average across the US per hour wage for housekeepers and guest service now tops $15. Think about where that was just 5 or 6 years ago. There are some markets where that's much higher, but when you looked at across the country, across the US, that was a $8 to $9 number, 2015. Given that rapid rise, think about how that impacts profits. And I think the point, Suzanne, you were making of like now every hour has to be really scrutinized. A mistake is not a $6 or $8 mistake. A mistake can quickly add up if you were thinking about overtime incorrectly or having too much overtime or scheduling incorrectly. So this is just this one slide for those that are seeing it are showing what the average hourly wages and the rise in wages. And this is one of the stats that Hotel Effectiveness by Actabl has kind of in our arsenal as we look at the state of the US industry. And we're really trying to help hoteliers kind of be able to benchmark where they sit today versus their sister hotels, their competitors, others in their marketplace.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that wage growth is over $15 an hour nationally right now. Of course, it's going to be higher in places like California and New York versus some places like maybe, I'm just going to say randomly, like Kentucky or Tennessee that has the lower cost of living over there. I don't know that for a fact, but just as an example. I'm most concerned about the changing the term house man to house person. I'm afraid that I'm going to be forced to change my name at some point. How do we all stand on this particular case?
Glenn.
All right, next slide, because we're now running out of time with you, Adam. New hire wages.
Yeah, the key takeaway, new hires wages are going up and they're kind of going up across the board, but team members that are tenured are going up fastest. And that's because they have to maintain a premium against other industries that they could theoretically go get jobs in. So that's kind of a key takeaway here. The next slide actually has something that I really want to share, which is an important stat around, I think it's
and again, just to underscore what you're saying is if Amazon's paying more, you're going to be forced to pay more as well to keep those people. All right, so what are we looking at now?
Back to housekeepers, and I have 2 more wage slides I want to talk about. Housekeeper wages, like I said before, are now topping over $15 an hour nationally. The thing that I'd love your listeners to pay attention to, we're seeing on average about a 3-ish% increase in housekeeper wages per quarter. So we're in August 2022. Where are we going to be a year from now, and how are you budgeting what you're spending? If you don't build your 2023 budget reflecting this continual rise in wages, you are going to have a moment where you have an unpleasant aha moment when you realize wage rate is not matching what is in your budget. So the biggest feedback or recommendation I'd give, however you're budgeting, whether you're doing that offline or whether you're doing using a tool to help you, are you thinking about that 3 to 4% wage rate increase?
Wow. 28%.
So significant. Whew.
That's really rough. Not saying that people don't deserve every penny they're earning. But wow, that's a whole lot for hoteliers to have to deal with, particularly since everything else is also raising in prices. And, we've raised, I think, as an industry, we've pushed rates as much as we possibly can at this point to sell the rooms. But if the expenses keep increasing, it's going to be very difficult going forward. So we got, I think, one more slide here for you.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'll kind of hit on, and I don't want to paint a scary picture, I'm going to just use this as a mechanism to reinforce why it is so critical that you partner with a tool platform, support network like Actabl to look forward, is turnover. We spend all this money finding people. We know what the huge cost of recruiting is, and then the cost of a loss of a team member. But there's a massive turnover. And so for those that are not looking at the slides, room attendant turnover is kind of still topping pre-pandemic levels on over one room attendant turns over 100% or more per year. Average room attendant turnover is 134%. What I think is really important to note is how this is varied when you think about tenured versus new managers. One area where it is very important is thinking about the GM or the AGM roles. Many of the leaders in our hotels, and this is kind of where we started at the beginning with Suzanne, you were talking about the executive housekeeper, are new to the industry. There is a lot of turnover that we are seeing in team members that are new at line level. But what we're seeing is a lot of turnover from tenured team members that are not hourly, that are AGMs and GMs. Right. And what that is telling us is these folks are seeing opportunities outside the industry. And when they're replaced, because somebody will come in to be the new GM, they're less seasoned team members that are replacing very seasoned team members. That changes the dynamic for what above property leaders have to offer up for training, coaching, guidance to those on-property team members. We can't expect that a GM entering a courtyard today may have the same knowledge base that they had 15 years ago.
Right.
And if they don't have that knowledge base, like what are literally the tools we give them as above property leaders to succeed? So I want to kind of leave the group with that thought to say, like, how do we support the on-property leaders that we have to set them up for success? How do we give them direction? That's really important.
That's really great.
A little deeper on that, Adam, for a quick moment. So when we've got these tenured folks that are leaving, and you indicated that they're leaving for somewhere else other than the industry, we don't necessarily have the stats to go to that. We are making kind of an assumption. They could be looking at going where they think the grass might be greener at another location because of the move. So that would almost be an interesting study into and of itself to see how that puzzle piece kind of fits together.
Yeah, and I think I love your analogy of the grass is greener. I can go work for another management company, or I could move elsewhere. And some people definitely do that. But I think the key insight as you kind of look through qualitative and have conversations with leaders in our space, I think people realized during the pandemic that left and decided not to come back. And as we as operators or hoteliers are filling roles, we've been searching to find folks. And not every one of those team members that we're finding, say, went through a traditional management training program. They may have entered the industry from another space.
Let's talk real quick, and then we'll let you go. Our very own producer, Dave, general manager of the hotel, even Midtown East.
I love Even, as you know, clearly.
I know, for those of you who don't know, he was there at the inception, helped create that particular brand. And I always think of you every time I go see producer Dave. And he's 34 years old. He's a young GM. This is his first GM position. He's going to need more training and assistance than folks that may have been doing it for 20 years already. It's a reality as we bring in our next generation. How about a quick pitch for Actabl and the tools by Hotel Effectiveness? Then we'll let you go.
Oh, sure. Yeah. For those that don't know, Actabl has brought together Hotel Effectiveness, Profit Sword, Alice, and Transcendent, 4 platforms that are critical to maximize profits for operators. We launched as our 4 collective product lines in June, and we have 11,000 plus hotels that use us. If anybody has questions about how to optimize labor, those QR codes that are on the slides point you directly to Hotel Effectiveness by Actabl, and we'd be happy to share any insights we can to help operators.
Adam, send me a PDF version of these slides, and I'll throw it as part of the audio version so people who are downloading the podcast can see the slides. All right. Thank you so much for being here, man. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
So great seeing you guys both. See you soon. Take it easy.
Bye. All right. That was really great. I love always talking to Adam or Dell over at Actabl and the Hotel Effectiveness crew over there.
Yeah, definitely great friends of us. And, honestly, with that last slide, we really got to get in transition that conversation back into retention and what are you doing to keep your employees? What are you doing to onboard? What are you doing to train? As Anthony has said, now is probably the best time to get into the industry because there are opportunities. But if we as owners, as managers, management development companies, if we're not investing in our employees that way to develop them, clearly you can see that level of turnover. We're going to continue to have massive issues within the industry.
How are your students feeling about their opportunities going forward?
Well, they have class with me, Miss Pineapple, and so it's always enthusiastic
The
and
real
fun.
world, not how they're going to be doing in school, after school.
No, but you know what? I think some of the comments that I get back is that they see my passion for the industry when I'm teaching, and that helps them to feel more confident about what they can do. And then I move that into the next stage of what are we doing for field trips, guest speakers, and engaging with our industry partners to let them see firsthand. So I'm super excited. I just lined up a whole bunch of guest speakers within the last day, and really cool, fun people. So that helps them, even though like teaching purchasing, I'm not gonna lie, purchasing is not really exciting in my opinion. That's in my Suzanne world. But we've got people who are amazing at it and really enjoy what they do. So that infusion and just starting to see that depth and breadth of our industry, it's so vast. And so keep people in the industry and keep them excited.
Yeah, I love it. All right, I'm looking forward to being on stage with the My Place Hotels people tomorrow. Come see me at a general session at the lodging conference. Starts on September 19th. Any final words, Suzanne, before we get out of here for today?
No, but I see that Tara agrees that retention is really important, and so that's what it is. So that's about it. I hope you enjoy the sweat state instead of the sunshine state. Don't worry, it's going to rain and it'll mess it all up. And
As a Jew, I can always use a good schwitz, as we say. So. It's going to be fun. All right, everybody. If you want to schwitz along with us, follow us on audio on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, wherever you get your shows. Well, we are there for you. And for some reason, if your favorite podcast site doesn't contain No Vacancy Live, well, they're no good to you. No, they are. We'll just get it up on there. Just let us know what they are. And if you're listening to us on audio, why not give us a chance and look at our video? Watch on Anthony's pages on LinkedIn, Facebook, my pages on the same, plus our NoVacancyNews.com channel and on YouTube. All right, everybody, remember, you've got one life, so blaze on and
find your passion.
yeah, baby. See you tomorrow.